Welcome to the Minnesota WIC Required Training 2024. Today we will talk about what WIC is, some program requirements, and general information. WIC is a public health nutrition program that provides nutrition counseling. WIC also provides benefit cards loaded with nutritious foods to help families use the information received at their WIC appointments to make healthy choices for their families. Studies show that WIC helps decrease Medicaid costs by ensuring that families have access to healthy foods that can help ward off diseases associated with less healthy eating. WIC participants include pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum people, and children from birth to 5 years of age. Each state serves their own WIC population. Only residents of Minnesota can participate in the Minnesota WIC program. Each family who participates must meet income guidelines. Those guidelines mean that about half of all babies in Minnesota and the nation qualify for WIC services. WIC participants receive nutrition education at WIC appointments along with referrals to other health and social services as needed. Breastfeeding people also receive guidance and support as needed throughout the time they choose to breastfeed. Once participants are found eligible for the WIC program and receive nutrition education, they can use the education they receive to shop in your stores for healthy foods with their WIC cards. Foods are allowed on the WIC program based on meeting healthy requirements put in place by the federal government. Not all foods are WIC allowed. You can use the Minnesota WIC shopping guide or the My Minnesota WIC app, which we'll talk about later, to help you decide what foods are WIC allowed if you aren't sure. Now let's go through some of the categories of foods WIC allows. WIC allows fresh, frozen, and canned fruits and vegetables, whole grains, dairy foods, breakfast cereals, juice, protein foods, infant fruits and vegetables, infant cereal, and infant formula. The foods that WIC allows are based on research that shows which foods are most lacking in family meals and snacks. Each food group has to meet certain nutrition and package size requirements to be allowed by WIC. For example, protein foods only include certain sizes of peanut butter, canned or dry beans, or peas, not meats or other protein foods, except for tuna, which is allowed for exclusively breastfeeding women. Only certain whole grains are allowed, such as bread, tortillas, pasta, brown rice, and oats. Because WIC only authorizes certain package sizes, there may only be a few foods in each category that are WIC allowed. For example, cheese is only allowed in 8 or 16-ounce package sizes, so all other sizes of cheese are not eligible to be WIC allowed. The reason for this is that WIC is a supplemental program, so what WIC provides is not meant to meet the nutritional needs for the family for the entire month, and only certain package sizes are allowed. These sizes are determined at the federal level, and states must work within those sizes when allowing foods for WIC. Because only certain foods are WIC allowed, it can sometimes be challenging for a family to choose the right foods in your store. WIC has developed tools for both families and stores to better determine which foods are WIC allowed. Those include the Minnesota WIC Shopping Guide, the My Minnesota WIC app, which we will talk about later, and shelf labels that can be placed on the shelves in your store to direct customers to WIC allowed options. If you would like additional materials for your store, you can find the order form on our website. Some stores have developed their own shelf labels, which is okay as long as they have been officially approved by the Minnesota WIC program. Being kind to families who accidentally choose the wrong foods and helping them choose correct foods when time allows is always appreciated. Take a few minutes to determine which of these foods are WIC allowed and which ones are not. Pre-cut packaged fruit with no added ingredients, 8.9-ounce box of plain Cheerios, 20-ounce loaf of Sara Lee 100% whole wheat bread, milk in half gallons, 12-ounce package of plain mozzarella cheese sticks, 2-pack of 2-ounce Gerber plain infant fruits or vegetables, 16 to 18-ounce container of Jif Natural, 64-ounce container of Juicy Juice grape juice. So let's see what you got correct. The pre-cut packaged fruit with no added ingredients is WIC allowed. When it's cut into smaller size and then placed in a package for sale, that is allowed as long as it doesn't have any added ingredients like fruit dip, salad dressing, croutons, things like that. An 8.9-ounce box of plain Cheerios is not allowed. For cold breakfast cereals, the lowest size box is a 12-ounce box. So only 12 ounces are larger are allowed in a cold cereal. A 20-ounce loaf of Sara Lee is not allowed. The reason is because our whole grain items, for which bread is one, have to be a 16-ounce or 1-pound size package. Milk in half gallons has been allowed for quite some time, and it still continues to be. A 12-ounce package of mozzarella cheese sticks is not allowed because, as you'll remember, only 8 or 16-ounce packages are allowed. Nothing in between or outside of those sizes. A 2-pack of 2-ounce plain Gerber infant fruits or vegetables is not allowed because even though the 2 ounces, if you add them up, equals 4, the actual container size for a WIC allowed baby food is a 4-ounce container, so they must be 4 ounces. A 16 to 18-ounce container of Jif Natural is not allowed because Jif and Skippy both, their natural versions, have added ingredients that make them no longer fit the definition of peanut butter. So they're more of a spread, a peanut butter spread. And so that's the reason they are not allowed. We do have other natural peanut butters on our list as allowed. And so people can choose other natural peanut butters if that's what they would like. And a 64-ounce container of Juicy Juice grape is not allowed. Juicy Juice grape is actually a blend of grape and apple juice. And so in WIC, you can only have a single flavor or single variety juice in the container. So Juicy Juice, because it's a mixture, it is not allowed. Now let's take a look at some program requirements. Some requirements are mandatory to participate as an authorized WIC vendor. So let's talk about some of those requirements. Every store must meet minimum stock requirements at all times in order to be authorized and to maintain authorization as a WIC vendor. There are 2 tiers of requirements, and those are based on how many people live within certain counties. The metro area has higher stocking requirements than greater Minnesota stores, and you can find the minimum stock requirements on our website. These requirements are checked on unannounced monitoring visits to your store, and those can happen at any time and focus on minimum stock and pricing. All WIC foods must be priced either on the shelf or on the individual food item, and these are checked on unannounced monitoring visits to your store. WIC does not post maximum prices, and the guidance is to charge WIC customers the same you would charge a customer paying with another payment type. These prices are updated and downloaded into register systems when they change. The WIC program monitors prices continuously to make sure that prices are updated according to market price fluctuations. We have access to data and can see the prices WIC vendors are charging customers for WIC foods, and that data is used to determine the maximum prices for WIC. Not posting product prices and charging higher prices for WIC customers than customers paying with a different payment type is a violation of your WIC agreement and may result in you losing your WIC authorization, which means you would no longer be able to accept WIC at your store. Because infant formula is the only food babies consume for their nutrition, it is extremely important to purchase formula only from authorized wholesalers. You can find a list of authorized wholesalers on the WIC website. Many pharmacies within stores are authorized to sell infant formula for WIC. The main exception is CVS pharmacies located within larger or superstores. Those pharmacies are not authorized for WIC. And if you have questions about whether or not your store pharmacy is authorized to sell infant formula, inquire with your corporate office or your store manager. All cashiers at your store must know how to perform a balance inquiry, purchase, and void. In a WIC transaction, the midpoint receipt must be presented to the WIC customer unless this step is displayed on the screen or pen pad instead. This midpoint receipt would print after the WIC customer slides the WIC card and enters the PIN, and is how they determine which foods are coming off their WIC card. It can avoid time-consuming voids if the customer is not prepared to pay the balance due at the end of the WIC payment. Transaction steps will vary from store to store or chain to chain. If you're unsure of how to perform the balance inquiry, purchase, and void, check with your service provider or your corporate office. If you need help with general WIC training or other questions related to WIC transactions, you may contact the health.wic vendor at state.mn.us email address, and someone will be able to assist you. Violating the terms of your vendor agreement can have serious consequences. If you have violated your WIC agreement, you may receive a sanction, which can include a monetary penalty or disqualification of your authorization, which means you can no longer accept WIC cards at your store. Some examples of violations include overcharging, which is charging a WIC customer more than a customer paying with a different payment type, substituting non-WIC foods, and failing to have minimum stock. If you cannot locate your vendor agreement, one is available for view on our website. If there's an error in the amount you were paid for a WIC transaction, you can contact the health.wic vendor at state.mn.us email, and someone can assist you. You may never ask a WIC customer to pay the difference if you charge a higher price than the maximum price for WIC. You may never contact a WIC customer for any reason. If you need to relay a message to a WIC customer, you can contact us at the email address on the slide, and we can contact the customer on your behalf. If you are regularly exceeding WIC NTEs, which is not to exceed maximum prices, please contact us for consideration on raising the maximum price. If we see that other stores that are the same size and located within the same type of area, either urban or rural, are also exceeding these maximums, we can raise the maximum price on that food. If you do not have a WIC food in stock, you may never charge a customer the customer's WIC card and have the customer return for the item later. Instead, the customer will need to return to your store for the item when it is in stock, and the WIC card must be used to purchase the item at that time. Incentives or offering a free item or service specifically for WIC customers to shop in your store is not allowed. For example, you may not offer a free soft drink to attract WIC shoppers to your store. If you offer a free soft drink, you have to everyone who shops at your store, then you also have to offer it to the WIC participant as well. But you can't offer something to only WIC customers for shopping in your store. If your store offers a loyalty program or a rewards program for purchases at your store, that must be applied to WIC purchases as well. What is offered to your customers in general must also be offered to WIC customers. You must notify WIC of a change of ownership before it happens. You'll need to fill out an application for a change of ownership, but the process will be faster than if you were applying as a brand new store. Please let us know a month in advance of the change if possible so that we have time to fully process the application so that there's no break in accepting WIC cards at your store. If you do not apply for a change of ownership in enough time for us to fully process the application and notify your POS service provider, you may have a period where you are not able to accept WIC cards. For a sale to be considered a change of ownership, the store personnel who oversee WIC and how to handle WIC transactions at the store must have been with the store for at least 3 months and must understand the rules of the program and how to do WIC transactions. If that's not the case, the new owner will need to apply as if the store was a brand new store. Changes of ownership are considered any owner being added who will own 20% or more of the store. Any owner who leaves the ownership of a store needs to be reported to WIC, but an application does not need to be filled out. For example, if John and Ahmed own a store, each at 50%, and John leaves the ownership, but Ahmed remains and now owns 100%, that needs to be reported to WIC, but the store does not need to apply as a change of ownership. It's only if someone new comes into the ownership of the store at 20% or more when a change of ownership application needs to be submitted. If you fail to notify us of an ownership change, your WIC agreement will be terminated, which means you can no longer accept WIC at your store and you would need to wait a year before you can reapply. Now we're going to talk about some general WIC information. The approved product list, or APL, is the list of all foods that are WIC allowed. This list of foods is downloaded into register systems regularly to update the system with the most current WIC allowed foods. If a register system isn't up to date with the APL, a transaction may present with a card decline. When this happens, it isn't WIC's fault. Contact your point of sale service provider or corporate office to make sure the APL is up to date and in the register system. Sale items might not be set up correctly for WIC at times. If a transaction presents as a card decline and there are sale items in the transaction, try removing those items to see if the transaction will go through. You can ring the sale items one by one in individual transactions if that was the reason for the card decline. Balance inquiries are a useful tool to help determine if a food is on a WIC card and available for purchase. If you need help running a balance inquiry, contact your point of sale service provider or store manager. The My Minnesota WIC app is available for download on mobile devices. WIC customers can view their benefit balance, find stores that accept WIC, scan UPCs of foods in the food finder to find out if they are WIC allowed, and check out shopping tips to help with WIC shopping. For full functionality, the customer must register their card with the app. Stores can also download the app to their phones or devices if permitted to see if a food is WIC allowed. Remember, unless a WIC card is registered with the app will only show if a food is generally allowed, not if it is allowed for a specific customer. The only thing that should not be scanned are fresh produce UPCs and PLUs. These are not in the WIC app since Minnesota WIC does not generally add fresh UPCs and PLUs to the app. Fresh produce mapping is a process that stores must complete for fresh produce to ring up for WIC. UPCs are 12-digit codes and must be mapped or linked to a 4 or 5-digit PLU in the store's POS system in order to ring for WIC. UPCs for fresh produce change often, and Minnesota WIC cannot keep track of all the fresh produce UPCs in the state, so that is why stores must map or link these UPCs with a PLU for the same item. If a fresh produce item doesn't ring up for WIC, you can have the customer check their benefit balance to make sure they have enough benefits remaining to purchase the item. If they do, don't assume that the fresh produce item is not allowed. Instead, follow your store's process for reporting fresh produce that needs to be mapped. Some fresh produce items are in the WIC APL. This fresh produce is in packages that have UPCs that don't change. Some stores have tried scanning the UPCs in the My Minnesota WIC app to determine if a fresh produce item is allowed, but this should not be done because most fresh produce is allowed and there are only some UPCs in the APL. Stores are responsible for mapping or linking fresh produce, and therefore, not all fresh produce UPCs will scan as WIC allowed, even though most are. Almost all fresh produce items are WIC allowed, with the exception of herbs, garlic, ginger, and salad mixes or pre-cut produce that contains a dip or other ingredients. So if a fresh produce item is not ringing for WIC, it's almost always because the item is not mapped. When a fresh produce item is not mapped at your store, the process of mapping does not happen immediately in most cases. The customer will need to wait for the item to be mapped in order to purchase it with the WIC card. They can choose to get a different item, or they can come back when the item they want is mapped for WIC sale, usually in a day or two. Although some systems are able to map produce items for sale immediately. We have resources on our website to explain mapping, why it's important, and what to do if you have questions. There is a section at this first link with general information, and the second link is a 5-minute video that can be used for training purposes or to refresh your memory on the mapping process. WIC uses email in almost all cases to communicate important information, such as information about food recalls, to send out WIC newsletters, report transaction issues, communicate about a violation or problem, or simply to ask you a question. Please make sure that you check your spam folders regularly so you do not miss important communications from the state WIC office. You may update your email by filling out a form on our website or sending an email to health.wicvendor@state.mn.us. And that's the end of our presentation for today. If you have any questions, please email us at the email address, and we'll be happy to assist you however we can. Thank you. Goodbye.